A few days back from me recording this, Bari Weiss, who is a columnist for the New York Times, posted on her personal website this letter that was addressed to the New York Times publisher, A.G. Sulzberger, about her resignation from her position. And she was, I think, well respected in the political left and as a journalist. I think she was only 35, so rather young, but has achieved a lot and gotten some accolades. And I think this is coming with the long string of things like the Harper's Bazaar letter by I think 100 or 150 people who normally lean more to the political left, academics, writers. J.K. Rowling was one of the more popular people on that. Steven Pinker, a bunch of other academics talking about cancel culture and talking about how it's kind of toxic. So I just wanted to read this and I'll give some thoughts. And I think it might be worthwhile to actually have in a video form because I haven't read the letter yet, had some interest in it, and maybe you'd have some interest in actually just hearing it. And I might have some thoughts related to it as I read. Okay, so before the reading, just a few more thoughts, and then I'll get right into the reading. I have been talking about this in some recent videos about people should speak out more. Because I think what we risk to lose, both in the United States of America and the world in general, the United States of America uniquely has that freedom of speech that has made that place so much better. You look at everything that has a negative form in the world that exists in America, it seems to be less. You look at extremists, you look at oppression, you look at sexism, you look at racism, and due to the fact that people have been able to just speak out against it, simply speak out, and then from having those thoughts and having the ability to speak and having some people hear what you say and come and defend you, having the Second Amendment also to be able to defend some of your speech. But on one hand, I understand. I'm not one to say that freedom of speech is freedom of consequences. There are consequences that you're going to have for speaking out. But look at the consequences that people are dealing with from not being even allowed to speak out in other countries. Whereas you have a place like United States of America where people do speak out, have that freedom of speech, and they choose to be silent. So I've been talking about that in some videos and asking people what is your reasoning behind this. And I've been talking about how more people are coming out. Because this thing that we're seeing in this culture war that's going on in the United States of America, this cultural civil war, it can't get more. It's like, I started watching these things back in 2015. There's only so much absurd that can become. I just saw like a recent thing where somebody was posting about Ghislaine Maxwell, who was Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, who was caught, and then they're like, yeah, he's going to take down Trump, and all these people are like, yes, I do my nails, and they seem to be supporting somebody who's been accused of possibly being a pedophile, possibly being a pimp of underage girls. But because they hate Trump so much, and I'm like, they can't really mean that. It has to just be some kind of role-playing meme, virtue signaling type of thing, because they can't really mean that. I mean, if they do, how much more absurd can it truly get? How much worse can it truly get? And if you do think it can get a lot worse than this, then speaking out, doing something, being like, okay, I get it. If I speak out, I might have to lose this job. I look at these things and there's these shows like The Greed, American Greed, and different things where they're showing these people who are scammers. These people were like, yeah, I used to work with him. Yeah, he was doing all these things with the books and he was cheating these people. But then I kind of was like, okay, you should kind of stop doing this. But I couldn't change him. And then he offered me this job and I kind of just took it. And I was like, okay, maybe I can't do this anymore, then I'm going to leave. And like, wait. You did it for like 10 years with him. You didn't ask these questions. You weren't wondering how all this money was being spent. You were aware of some of these things, and now I'm supposed to just be like, oh, you're okay because now you were speaking out. When did you speak out before? One I just saw was like Fannie Mae. Some guy was doing these mortgages with Fannie Mae, which is this government lender. And then Fannie Mae was like, okay, some of the stuff is irregular, so we're going to leave. We're not going to work with you. But we're also not going to tell anybody else about this. And then he kept doing it for 10 more years and racked up like $500 million in just fraud. And it's like, what if Fannie Mae had spoken out and said something? What if other people had said something before? How many people's lives would have been improved or saved in these kind of situations? So that's just kind of the thing I'm asking. I've already talked about how I think right flight is happening. Not just even right flight, the right kind of flight, not just political right, but the right kind of things where people are like, look, I'm going to vote with my feet. This is something Americans, I think, have also been able to do. United States of America. It's a continental-sized country. You move to different regions, you move across borders, and you could be in very different areas. People are saying, we're leaving these blue areas, we're leaving these leftist areas, we're leaving these places because this is not functional anymore. I'm not just going to sit here quiet and take this because I have to live in New York City, so I'm just going to be okay with Bill de Blasio, the mayor, saying, oh, you can have public gatherings for Black Lives Matter, but everything else is canceled because somehow Black Lives Matter is somehow going to protect you from this supposed danger of this pandemic. Like it's absurdity going on. People just going around, just lawlessness, destruction, lack of security, and people are saying, I can't speak because I have to secure certain things in my life. But I'm saying, if you are just quietly securing these things in your life, how much of these things in your life going to continue and last if you keep propping these things up? I talked about this in a separate video about Google, and we'll get to the reading soon with this diatribe. But where I was like, look, I want companies to come out and say, this is how we are. This is what we're doing right now. And this is how we do that game song. Yeah, so do that. Be who you are. New York Times, just come out and be open about the kind of environment you are. And the people who quietly say, I'm just going to stay here and keep cashing my check. I might disagree with these things, but I don't want. You're propping that up. Just leave. Let these people be in that kind of cesspool environment and see how long that thing lasts. You go to places where it's more about what you're doing for that business, or they're more open to your general world political view. And I'll be interested to see, as I get into actually reading this right now, what was she describing from her own words as oppression? The things she thought she was experiencing as somebody who is politically left. I think she would self-identify as somebody who's in the political left. Is she subject to the same kind of things that you consider oppression, that are keeping you, who might be on the political right, quiet from actually speaking up? Or will the things she points out here be considered oppression to you, be considered worth leaving a job for you? What do you think is at risk? So just getting into the reading now. Dear AG, it is with sadness that I write to you that I am resigning from the New York Times. I joined the paper with gratitude and optimism 3 years ago. I was hired with the goal of bringing in voices that would not otherwise appear in your pages, first-time writers, centrists, conservatives, and others who would not naturally think of the Times as their home. The reason for this effort was clear. The paper's failure to anticipate the outcome of the 2016 election meant that it didn't have a firm grasp on the country it covers. Dean Baquet and others have admitted as much on various occasions. The priority in opinion was to help redress that critical shortcoming. I was honored to be part of that effort, led by James Bennett. I am proud of my work as a writer and as an editor. Among those I helped bring to our pages, the Venezuelan dissident Willy Arteaga, the Iranian chess champion Dorsa Derkshani, and the Hong Kong Christian Democrat Derek Lam. Also, Ayan Hirsi Ali, Masih Alinejad, Zaina Arafat, Elna Baker, Rachel Den Hollander, Matty Friedman, Nick Gillespie, Heather Haying, Randall Kennedy, Julius Crane, Monica Lewinsky, Glenn Lowry, Jesse Singal, Ali Soufan, Chloe Valdari, Thomas Chatron Williams, Wesley Yang, and many others. But the lessons that ought to have followed the election, lessons about the importance of understanding other Americans, the necessity of resisting tribalism, and the centrality of the free exchange of ideas to a democratic society, have not been learned. Instead, a new consensus has emerged in the press, but perhaps especially at this paper, that truth isn't a process of collective discovery, but an orthodoxy already known to an enlightened few whose job is to inform everyone else. Twitter is not on the masthead of the New York Times, but Twitter has become its ultimate editor. As the ethics and mores of that platform have become those of the paper itself has increasingly become a kind of performance space. Stories are chosen and told in a way to satisfy the narrowest of audiences, rather than to allow a curious public to read about the world and then draw their own conclusions. I was always taught that journalists were charged with writing the first rough draft of history. Now, history itself, is one more ephemeral thing molded to fit the needs of a predetermined narrative. My own forays into wrongthink have made me a subject of constant bullying by colleagues who disagree with my views. They have called me a Nazi and a racist. I have learned to brush off comments about how I am writing about the Jews again. Several colleagues perceived to be friendly with me were badgered by coworkers. My work and my character are openly demeaned on company-wide Slack channels where masthead editors regularly weigh in. There some workers insist I need to be rooted out if this company is to be a truly inclusive one, while others post axe emojis next to my name. Still other New York Times employees publicly smear me as a liar and a bigot on Twitter, with no fear that harassing me will be met with appropriate action. They never are. There are terms for all of this: unlawful discrimination, hostile work environment, and constructive discharge. I am no legal expert, but I know that this is wrong. I do not understand how you have allowed this kind of behavior to go on inside your company in full view of the paper's entire staff and the public. And I certainly can't square how you and other Times leaders have stood by while simultaneously praising me in private for my courage. Showing up for work as a centrist at an American newspaper should not require bravery. Part of me wishes I could say that my experience was unique, but the truth is that intellectual curiosity, let alone risk-taking, is now a liability at the Times. Why edit something challenging to our readers, or write something bold, only to go through the numbing process of making it ideologically kosher, when we can assure ourselves of job security and clicks by publishing our 4,000th op-ed arguing that Donald Trump is a unique danger to the country and the world? And so self-censorship has become the norm. What rules that remain of the Times are applied with extreme selectivity? If a person's ideology is in keeping with the new orthodoxy, they and their work remain unscrutinized. Everyone else lives in fear of the digital thunderdome. Online venom is excused so long as it is directed at the proper targets. Op-eds that would have easily been published just 2 years ago would now get an editor or a writer in serious trouble if not fired. If a piece is perceived as likely to inspire backlash internally or on social media, the editor or writer avoids pitching it. If she feels strongly enough to suggest it, she is quickly steered to safer ground. And if, every now and then, she succeeds in getting a piece published that does not explicitly promote progressive causes, it happens only after every line is carefully massaged, negotiated, and caveated. It took the paper 2 days and 2 jobs to say that the Tom Cotton op-ed fell short of our standard. We attached an editor's note on a travel story about Jaffa shortly after it was published because it failed to touch on an important aspect of Jaffa's makeup and its history. But there is still none appended to Cheryl Stayed's fawning interview with the writer Alice Walker, a proud anti-Semite who believes in lizard Illuminati. The paper of record is more and more the record of those living in a distant galaxy, one whose concerns are profoundly removed from the lives of most people. This is a galaxy in which, to choose just a few recent examples, the Soviet space program is lauded for its diversity, the doxing of teenagers in the name of justice is condoned, and the worst caste systems in human history includes the United States alongside Nazi Germany. Even now, I am confident that most people at the Times do not hold these views. Yet they are cowed by those who do. Why? Perhaps because they believe the ultimate goal is righteous. Perhaps because they believe that they will be granted protection if they nod along as the coin of our realm, language, is degraded in service to an ever-shifting laundry list of right causes. Perhaps because there are millions of unemployed people in this country and they feel lucky to have a job in a contracting industry. Or perhaps it's because they know that, nowadays, standing up for principle at the paper does not win plaudits. It puts a target on your back. Too wise to post on Slack, they write to me privately about the new McCarthyism that has taken root at the paper of record. All this bodes ill, especially for independent-minded young writers and editors paying close attention to what they'll have to do to advance in their careers. Rule 1. Speak your mind at your own peril. Rule 2. Never risk commissioning a story that goes against the narrative. Rule 3. Never believe an editor or publisher who argues you to go against the grain. Eventually, the publisher will cave to the mob, the editor will get fired or reassigned, and you'll be hung out to dry. For these young writers and editors, there is one consolation. As places like the Times and other once great journalistic institutions betray their standards and lose sight of their principles, Americans still hunger for news that is accurate, opinions that are vital, and debate that is sincere. I hear from these people every day. An independent press is not a liberal idea or a progressive ideal or a democratic ideal. It's an American ideal. You said a few years ago. I couldn't agree more. America is a great country that deserves a great newspaper. None of this means that some of the most talented journalists in the world don't still labor for this newspaper. They do, which is what makes it a liberal environment especially heartbreaking. I will be, as ever, a dedicated reader of their work. But I can no longer do the work that you brought me here to do. The work that Adolf Ochs described in that famous 1896 statement. To make of the columns of the New York Times a forum for the consideration of all questions of public importance, and to that end to invite intelligent discussion from all shades of opinion. Ochs' idea is one of the best I've encountered, and I've always comforted myself with the notion that the best ideas win out. But ideas cannot win on their own. They need a voice. They need a hearing. Above all, they must be backed by people willing to live them. Sincerely, Bari. So, yeah, I was wrong on saying she identify as a leftist, but like she probably would be a leftist in the classical sense, but it's just she considers herself a centrist, and some of the things she said here are things that I suspected about some of these places. And this is if you're living in that echo chamber. If you are in New York City, this is something I've lived in New York City, met some friends who are libertarians, political right. I've talked about how some people, that would be the Jerusalem of the progressive religion if it actually end up becoming the religion. But would it be more like a contested Jerusalem, like Jerusalem is contested now with Islam versus the Christians? Because you also have things like the libertarian movement is very strong there. You have a lot of anarcho-capitalists. You have things coming out like the Mises, the Rothbards, and these kind of people who also are drawn to these big centers with these different ideas, but it's about who is speaking about what, who is talking about what, where the conversation's happening. So you can live in New York City and be like, okay, even if it's 10% politically to the left, conservative, or even outright libertarians, you could say it's 10%. Yeah, so let's say it's 10%. Let's say it's 5%. And the greater New York City is like 20 million people. That's still a lot of people. It's still talking about like 1 million people in that area that would kind of believe and want to actually debate and discuss things that you are familiar with. Yet you can go to a smaller city and find it to be 50% and not even have close to that, because the city itself could have 2 million people. So it would only be like, no, okay, so that would be 1 million. But you get what I mean. It would be like 1 million people. So you have 50%, but it'd be like something like 500,000 people. So you have that kind of situation. So with Bari here, she's talked about this, and she's saying, look, this is a system, and this is something I've talked about with like the whole fake news and all these kind of things. The politics, the ideology has started going into other aspects of life. Progressivism is not necessarily simply a religion. It's more like a way of life that demands purity in mind, body, and soul, and action, and thoughts, and all these things. And as she said at the end here, ideas cannot win on their own. You might have good ideas. The idea of what you have, what you think of when you when you hear the word America in your mind, that idea might be something positive and good for the world. But unless you actually speak about it and tell people about it and have other people hear it, use your voice to have other people hear that idea, they're going to be hearing what the New York Times is telling them, what all these other people are telling them. I used to hear what other people were telling me instead of going out and searching it for myself and finding that information, trying to find that evidence. I personally used to be one of the people who was like, yeah, I'm just going to listen to these people. I was even a bit embarrassed to listen to certain channels. I'm like, can I share this? And I got enough interested in finding enough information to feel, yeah, I can actually share this content on my wall. Started getting more conversations with people in my life. And then now I started making the content on my own and trying to spread these things and finding new ways to communicate things that I truly believe in. And my life has been better for it. Has it been as financially lucrative as some things I could think of if I just kind of were just like, go along with it? I probably not. If certain things had changed in my life where I had certain different demands and concerns, Would I do things differently? I can definitely imagine me doing some things differently. Do I think I would be happier if I did that? I don't think so. I think right now I'm as happy can be going along in this fight, speaking out about certain of these things that I enjoy and that I appreciate. And my hat's off to Bari. Sounds like an unfortunate kind of situation that she's in, but it's something that is being noticed by people. I know people working in certain places that are big in messaging and things like that who say this environment is in a certain way that is not quite conducive to what I think is positive. But hey, it's a paycheck. Hey, we're getting along. Hey, it might get better. I might be doing these things in these other places. So I understand that. And just as she said, in general, politics is one part of the newspaper, is one part of reporting. There's still good reporters doing certain things. Like if a reporter just goes out and says, look, this cat is stuck in a tree, now we're getting this cat down, that is just a reporting of actual information. And I think majority of the paper is still just actually getting reportage of actual things. Now, the politics has seeped in, the ideology has seeped into other places and other things. And I think part of why it got this bad is because people didn't think it was as bad in the past. I've been aware of some of these things going on, these trends going on for quite some time. I felt the effect of these trends and this indoctrination and this programming. I have come out from that, and I don't think it's an easy process, but I think it is worthwhile to come out from that, ask these questions, try to find evidence for the things you believe in, and start conversing with people around you. And you will find out that you might be surrounded with a lot of people that might agree with the things that you're saying. And once you start speaking out, you will, I think, attract other people who thought, oh, this person is just some random person, this lost cause. Then they hear you speak about something, they're like, oh, wait, maybe we can actually talk about some other things. And then you get in a conversation, then all of a sudden you strike up a new relationship, and that opens a whole new vista of information and knowledge and friendship and camaraderie. And I think that is a positive thing. I think more people should do what Bari has done here and come out and say, no, I think this is wrong. I'm going to take the current hit in my job. And yes, she was working at the New York Times, so she was probably being paid rather well, and she could probably switch to another job and get some other employment. But just as she's talking about here, if you are interested in giving reportage to people, Americans, more than I've seen in other cultures, want that information. People in general want that information, want that education. There's more means than any to actually communicate. I've been doing this YouTube channel, I have had a blog, just doing my own small communication in my small ways and just reaching out to people. I've had some great conversations talking to people. Oh, this is a good thought. Oh, you didn't think about this? How about this? Then that teaches me something else. You can start that way. And you might be able to do this in a way that's a lot better than I can. You can definitely reach a group of people that I can't reach. You can find ways to keep doing the things that you enjoy doing. And if you want to be a human information vector and participate in those, then we have many acquired ignorance destruction systems that we can use in order to do that. And the New York Times, you may have come up thinking that was the sole way to do it. But there's so many more ways. And especially if you're in the United States of America, that is a place that has unique systems with that enshrinement of the freedom of speech in its creation, in its culture, to do that. And that has reach, global reach. That has more reach. I think just being American itself will give you that reach. Or not even just American. Like, I'm not American right now. I'm recording this in Nairobi, Kenya. I'm still posting these things out, but I'm using systems that are global. You can speak to people. You can reach people. You can communicate with people. There's people that have done, the blueprints are out there. You get out there, you join that, you find your own niche, you find your own way to do that. You join up with people, you communicate with other people in the same spheres that you're in. And the information is still there, the information is still wanted, the demand is still there, and you can still provide it. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this reading. I think it was worthwhile to actually read. I think this is going to be the continued part where I do think there is a change in the zeitgeist. It's more like a cruise ship, where it's going to take some time to turn and then change, and then we're going to keep going. We're going to upgrade to the next level of human society. We're going to be earthlings. Probably I don't know if it's going to be in my lifetime, where a significant amount of human beings actually look at themselves as earthlings. I think it might be like 150 years, but things change fast. Information changes fast. I don't know, but it's a good time to be alive, despite some of the things. I think something like this is a promising thing to hear, that even people within the system are aware of this. These systems that we think are broken from the outside, people inside are also realizing, like, like what if every single person that objected to what was going on up and left? Who would be left? And those people that would be left in there, one of my earliest videos on my channel was all that's left is left. Like, what if you actually got to situations where all these institutions that claim to be leftist were literally just being ran by some of the most rabid and fundamentalist people on the political left? What would that look like? I have a suspicion that there's a lot of centrists, a lot of people on the political right who are just quiet, who are fundamental, strong parts of some of these institutions. So I encourage you, pull a Bari Weiss on them and leave. Till next time, goodbye.